The thunder cracked like a whip across the darkening Montana sky, as Zara Zimmerman clutched the reins of her terrified horses, the wagon lurching violently beneath her. It was 1876, and the promise of a new beginning was dissolving in the torrential rain that had transformed the dusty trail into a treacherous river of mud. Zara had left everything behind in St. Louis, her family's expectations, the suitor who saw her only as a pretty ornament, and the suffocating life planned out for her. At 23, she had gambled everything on a land claim near Douglas, Wyoming territory, only to find herself stranded in the middle of nowhere as her wagon wheels splintered with a sickening crack. "Whoa, steady now." She called to her panicked team, her honey-brown hair plastered to her face as she fought to control the horses. The wagon tilted precariously, sending her precious cargo of supplies sliding. With trembling hands, she secured the brake and climbed down into ankle-deep mud, her blue calico dress immediately soaked through. The broken wheel had shattered beyond repair, the spokes splintered like matchsticks. Zara stood in the pouring rain, her shoulders slumped in defeat as she surveyed the damage. Night was falling fast, and she was miles from the nearest settlement. Wolves howled in the distance, sending a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with her sodden clothes. "I will not cry," she whispered fiercely, though no one was there to hear her. "I will not give up." But as darkness descended and the rain showed no signs of abating, Zara's resolve began to waver. She had taken shelter under the wagon, wrapping herself in a woolen blanket that provided little warmth. The howling of wolves grew closer and fear clawed at her throat. As dawn broke, the storm finally subsided, leaving behind a world washed clean and glistening. Zara emerged from beneath the wagon, stiff and shivering. Her situation hadn't improved with the daylight. She was still stranded, her provisions limited, and the nearest town days away on foot. She had just begun to assess the damage in the clear morning light when the sound of hoofbeats made her whirl around. A lone rider appeared on the horizon, his silhouette backlit by the rising sun. As he drew closer, Zara could make out a tall man atop a magnificent chestnut stallion. Her hand moved instinctively to the small revolver tucked in her pocket. A woman alone had to be cautious in these parts. "Looks like you've had some trouble," the man called out as he approached, his deep voice carrying across the distance between them. "Stay where you are," Zara replied, drawing her pistol with a steady hand. "State your business." The rider slowed his horse to a walk, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Name's Isaac Northrop, madam. Just passing through on my way to Douglas. Seems like you could use some assistance." Isaac removed his hat, revealing a head of dark hair streaked with gold from the sun. His face was weathered but handsome, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and eyes the color of a summer sky. He wore the practical attire of a working cowboy, worn leather chaps over denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a dust-covered vest. "I don't need charity," Zara said, though the pistol in her hand wavered slightly. A smile touched the corners of Isaac's mouth. "Not offering charity, madam. Just basic human decency. Can't leave a lady stranded in the middle of nowhere with wolves about." Zara hesitated, then slowly lowered her gun. "My wheel's broken beyond repair. I was headed to Douglas myself. I have a land claim there." Isaac dismounted, moving carefully so as not to startle her. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the broken wheel. When Zara nodded, he knelt to examine it. "You're right about it being beyond repair, but I might be able to fashion a temporary replacement that'll get you to Douglas." "You can do that?" Zara asked, relief and skepticism mingling in her voice. "Yes, madam. Spent some time as a wheelwright before I took to the open range. Got some tools in my saddlebags, and there's good hardwood in those trees yonder." He glanced up at her, his blue eyes meeting her amber ones. "It'll take a day or so. You got provisions to last?" Zara nodded. "Enough for a few days. I planned for delays, just not this kind." "Smart woman," Isaac said with approval. "Now, if you'll permit me, I'll set up camp and get started on that wheel." Over the next hours, Zara watched as Isaac worked with quiet efficiency. He first secured their position, building a small fire and establishing a camp a safe distance from the trail. Then he ventured into the nearby copse of trees, returning with suitable wood for the wheel. His hands, strong and calloused, worked the wood with surprising delicacy. "You never mentioned what brings a lady like yourself out here alone," Isaac said as evening approached and they sat by the fire, sharing a simple meal of beans and coffee. Zara stiffened. "A lady like myself." Isaac's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Educated, well-spoken. Clearly not born to the frontier." Zara relaxed slightly. "I wanted something that was mine, something I built with my own hands, not given to me because I married well or smiled prettily." She sipped her coffee. "My father wanted me to marry a banker back in St. Louis. A good match, everyone said. Except the man in question viewed women as decorative possessions with no thoughts worth hearing. So you headed west." "So I headed west," she confirmed. "Used the money my grandmother left me to buy a land claim. Everyone said I was mad." "Maybe you are," Isaac said with a grin, "but the frontier needs a bit of madness. Takes guts to leave everything familiar behind." "What about you?" Zara asked. "What's your story, Mr. Northrop?" "Isaac, please, and not much to tell. Orphaned young, raised by a blacksmith who taught me his trade. Found I preferred horses to people, so I took to cowboying. Been drifting since the war ended." "The war changed everything," Zara said softly. Isaac nodded, his eyes distant. "That it did." As night fell, Isaac insisted that Zara sleep in the wagon while he kept watch by the fire. "Wolves are hungry this time of year," he explained, "and there's other predators on two legs that might cause trouble." Zara knew she should protest, insist on taking her turn at watch, but exhaustion overwhelmed her principles. She climbed into the wagon, wrapped herself in blankets, and fell into the deepest sleep she'd known in weeks. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Isaac had already rekindled the fire and was cooking breakfast, his back to her as he worked. In the morning light, she could see the breadth of his shoulders, the way his shirt stretched across his back as he moved. A strange flutter stirred in her chest, one she quickly suppressed. "Good morning," she called, climbing down from the wagon. Isaac turned, a smile lighting his face. "Morning. Thought you might be hungry." He handed her a tin plate of bacon and biscuits. "Weather's holding, so I should be able to finish that wheel by sundown." They worked side by side throughout the day. Zara insisted on helping, and after a token protest, Isaac taught her how to smooth the wood for the spokes. His hands occasionally covered hers, guiding her movements, and each touch sent warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the spring sunshine. As promised, by sunset, a new wheel stood ready. It wasn't as finely crafted as the original, but Isaac assured her it would hold until they reached Douglas. "We'll set out at first light," he said as they ate their evening meal. "Should reach town in 2 days if the weather holds." "We?" Zara questioned, raising an eyebrow. "If you'll permit me to escort you," Isaac said, a hint of color touching his cheeks. "These trails can be dangerous for a lone traveler, and since we're headed the same way." "I would appreciate the company," Zara admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. The journey to Douglas proved more arduous than anticipated. Spring rains had washed out sections of the trail, forcing detours that added miles to their journey. But Isaac's presence made the hardships more bearable. He had a quiet strength about him, a steadiness that calmed Zara's fears. And he treated her as an equal, never questioning her ability to handle the team of horses or her decision to claim land of her own. On the second night of their journey, as they camped beside a small creek, Isaac shared more of his past. He'd fought for the Union in the war, had seen horrors that still haunted his dreams. After, he drifted west, working cattle drives and breaking horses, never staying in one place for long. "What will you do in Douglas?" Zara asked as they sat by the fire, the stars spread like diamonds above them. "There's a ranch outside town looking for a foreman," Isaac replied. "Figure it's time I put down some roots." "No family waiting for you somewhere," a shadow crossed his face. "No, lost my parents when I was young. Had a brother, but he fell at Gettysburg." Zara's heart ached for him. "I'm sorry." Isaac shrugged, but the gesture couldn't hide the pain in his eyes. "It was a long time ago." He looked at her across the fire. "What about you? No family missing you back in St. Louis?" "My parents think I've lost my mind," Zara said with a wry smile. "My sister writes regularly, though. She's the only one who understood why I had to leave." "And why did you have to leave?" Isaac's voice was gentle, genuinely curious. Zara stared into the flames, considering her answer. "I couldn't breathe there. Everything was decided for me: who I would marry, how I would live, what I was allowed to think or say. Out here." She gestured to the vast landscape around them. "Out here, I can be whoever I want to be." "And who do you want to be, Zara Zimmerman?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. "Someone who matters," she finally said. "Someone who builds something lasting with her own hands." Isaac's smile was warm in the firelight. "I think you already are that someone." They reached Douglas the following afternoon. The town was smaller than Zara had imagined: a dusty main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a few side streets with modest homes, and the promise of growth in the newly erected railroad station. Her land claim lay 3 miles outside of town, sight unseen until now. "I'll help you get settled," Isaac offered as they pulled up in front of the general store. "Make sure your place is habitable before I head to the Foster Ranch." Zara wanted to refuse, to prove she could manage on her own, but practicality won out. "Thank you. I would appreciate that." After restocking their supplies and making inquiries about her land, they set out for Zara's property. The terrain grew more rugged as they left town behind, the trail winding through pine-covered hills before opening into a small valley, bisected by a clear running stream. "This is it," Zara said, consulting the deed. "This is my land." The only structure was a small, dilapidated cabin that had clearly stood empty for some time, but the setting was beautiful, protected by hills on 3 sides, with good water and fertile soil in the valley bottom. Isaac whistled low. "You chose well. This is prime land." "I didn't choose it," Zara admitted. "It was what I could afford, but yes, it's better than I dared hope." They approached the cabin cautiously. The roof had partially collapsed and the door hung askew on rusted hinges. Inside was little more than a dirt floor and crumbling stone fireplace. "It needs work," Isaac said, stating the obvious. Zara squared her shoulders. "Then I'll work." They made camp outside the cabin that night, planning to assess the full extent of repairs needed in the morning. As they sat by the fire, Zara found herself studying Isaac's profile, the strong lines of his face softened by firelight. She had known him only days, yet she felt a connection to him that defied explanation. "I should thank you," she said suddenly. "For the wheel, for the escort, for everything." Isaac looked at her, his blue eyes reflecting the flames. "No thanks needed. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Zara shook her head. "They wouldn't have. Most men would have told me to go back to St. Louis where I belong." "Is that what you want to hear?" Isaac asked, his voice low. That you should give up and go home. No, Zara replied firmly. This is my home now, or it will be. Then I'd say you're exactly where you belong. The next morning they began work on the cabin. Isaac proved to be as skilled with carpentry as he was with horses, showing Zara how to replace rotted logs and repair the roof. They worked from dawn till dusk, stopping only for brief meals. By the end of the second day, the cabin had a sound roof and secure walls, though it remained sparse inside. On the third day, Isaac announced he needed to head to the Foster Ranch to secure his position. I've been away longer than planned, he explained, though he seemed reluctant to leave. Zara felt a pang of disappointment that surprised her with its intensity. Of course. You've already done more than I could have asked. The Foster place isn't far, Isaac said. Maybe 5 miles west of here if you need anything. I'll be fine, Zara assured him, squaring her shoulders. I have supplies, shelter, and determination. Isaac smiled, but concern shadowed his eyes. At least let me finish the door before I go. Can't have you sleeping in an unsecured cabin. By midday, a sturdy new door was in place, complete with a lock and iron hinges Isaac had brought from town. The moment of departure arrived too quickly. Isaac stood by his horse, hat in hand, looking at Zara with an expression she couldn't quite read. Thank you again, she said, extending her hand formally. Isaac took it, but instead of shaking it, he held it gently between both of his. You're welcome, Zara Zimmerman. You're the bravest woman I've ever met. Then he mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Zara standing outside her half-finished cabin with a strange emptiness in her chest. The next weeks passed in a blur of hard work. Zara discovered reserves of strength and determination she hadn't known she possessed. She finished the interior of the cabin, adding a small loft for sleeping. She cleared land for a garden, planted seeds brought from St. Louis, and even began constructing a chicken coop in anticipation of acquiring some laying hens. Every few days, she would make the journey into Douglas for supplies and news. The townspeople, initially skeptical of a woman homesteading alone, gradually warmed to her as they saw her perseverance. The general store owner, Mr. Jenkins, and his wife became particularly supportive, often setting aside items they thought she might need. Heard from Isaac Northrop lately? Mrs. Jenkins asked one afternoon as she helped Zara select fabric for curtains. Zara's heart gave a traitorous leap at the mention of his name. No, why would I? Mrs. Jenkins gave her a knowing look. No reason, just that he's been asking after you whenever he comes to town. He has. Zara tried to keep her voice neutral. Seems mighty concerned about your welfare. Mrs. Jenkins folded the blue calico Zara had selected. He's a good man, Isaac. One of the few who came back from the war still whole in spirit. Zara changed the subject, but her thoughts remained on Isaac as she drove her wagon home. She had found herself thinking of him often, his gentle strength, his kind eyes, the way his hands had moved so confidently as they worked together. But she had not come west to find a husband. She had come to find independence. Spring gave way to early summer, and Zara's little homestead began to take shape. Her garden flourished, and she had acquired 6 chickens that provided eggs enough for herself with some to trade in town. She had even begun breaking ground for a small wheat field, though the work was back-breaking with only hand tools. It was on a scorching July afternoon, as she struggled with the plow, that she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, she saw Isaac riding toward her, leading a second horse that pulled a small cart loaded with lumber and supplies. "Miss Zimmerman," he called, removing his hat as he approached. "Thought you might use some help with that field." Zara straightened, pushing damp strands of hair from her face. "Mr. Northrop, this is a surprise. Isaac dismounted, his eyes taking in the changes to her property. "You've done well," he said, genuine admiration in his voice. "Better than well. It's impressive." Pride warmed Zara's chest. "Thank you. But what brings you here with all that lumber? Thought your chickens deserved a proper coop," he said with a grin. "And maybe you could use a plow horse." He gestured to the sturdy bay gelding hitched to the cart. "Foster had extra, and I mentioned you were working this place alone." Zara was speechless. A plow horse would transform her ability to work the land, but it was too valuable a gift to accept. "I can't possibly, it's not charity," Isaac interrupted, seeming to read her thoughts. "It's an investment. Foster's looking to expand his cattle operation, and he needs good grazing agreements with neighboring properties. Your stream runs year-round, which makes your land valuable to him." "I see," Zara said, though she suspected there was more to the story. "And the lumber?" "That's from me," Isaac admitted. "Consider it payment for letting me camp on your land while I build your coop. The bunkhouse at Foster's is crowded and I could use some peace." It was a transparent excuse, but Zara found herself nodding. "Very well. You can set up camp by the stream. But I expect to learn how to build that coop alongside you." Isaac's smile was like sunrise. "I wouldn't have it any other way." What was meant to be a few days' visit stretched into a week, as Isaac helped not only with the chicken coop, but also with reinforcing the cabin walls and digging a proper well closer to the house. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side during the day and sharing quiet conversations by the fire in the evenings. Zara learned that Isaac had grown up in Ohio, the son of a schoolteacher father and a mother who had been born in England. His education had been interrupted by the war, but he still carried a love of books and had been delighted to discover Zara's small collection of volumes. "Wordsworth," he said one evening, finding a slim volume of poetry among her things. "You surprise me, Miss Zimmerman." "Why?" Zara challenged, taking the book from him. "Because a woman who can plow a field shouldn't also appreciate poetry," Isaac laughed. "No, because I wouldn't have pegged you for a romantic. I wandered lonely as a cloud," he quoted softly. Zara stared at him, startled. "You know Wordsworth?" "My mother loved poetry. She used to read to us every night." A shadow crossed his face. "I still hear her voice sometimes when I'm alone under the stars." The vulnerability in his admission touched Zara deeply. She found herself sharing things she had told no one else: her dreams for the land, her fears of failure, even the childhood nickname her father had given her. "Starlight," Isaac repeated when she told him. "It suits you." "How so?" Zara asked, curious. "Bright, constant, beautiful even when surrounded by darkness." His voice was low, his eyes never leaving hers. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken feelings. Zara looked away first, her heart racing. "It's getting late," she said, rising abruptly. "We should both get some rest." Isaac didn't push, but something had shifted between them. The next day, as they worked to finish the chicken coop, Zara was acutely aware of his presence, the strength in his arms as he lifted heavy beams, the grace with which he moved, the kindness in his eyes whenever he looked at her. By the week's end, the coop was finished, the well was dug, and there was no reason for Isaac to stay longer. Yet neither of them mentioned his departure as they sat by the fire on what should have been his last night. "Zara," Isaac finally said, breaking the comfortable silence. "There's something I need to tell you." She looked up, startled by the seriousness in his tone. "What is it?" "I didn't come here just to help with the coop. I came because I couldn't stay away." He met her gaze steadily. "From the moment I saw you standing beside that broken wagon, I knew you were someone special. These past months, working at Foster's, all I could think about was whether you were safe, whether you had what you needed." "Isaac, please let me finish." He took a deep breath. I'm not asking anything of you. You came west to be independent, to build something of your own. I respect that more than I can say, but I wanted you to know that if you ever decide you want companionship, I would consider it the greatest honor to court you properly." Zara's heart thundered in her chest. She had come west to escape the expectations of others, to prove she could succeed on her own terms. Yet in the weeks since meeting Isaac, she had begun to realize that independence didn't have to mean isolation. "I didn't come west looking for a husband," she said carefully. Isaac's face fell slightly, though he tried to hide it. "I understand." "But," Zara continued, reaching across to take his hand, "I didn't expect to find someone who sees me as I am and values that person. Someone who helps without taking over, who respects my dreams while sharing his own." Hope kindled in Isaac's eyes. "What are you saying, Zara?" "I'm saying that I would welcome your courtship, Isaac Northrop, but on one condition. Name it. That you understand this land is mine. Whatever happens between us, this homestead remains in my name." Isaac smiled, squeezing her hand. "I wouldn't have it any other way. Your independence is part of what I admire most about you." The courtship that followed was unlike any Zara had experienced in St. Louis. Isaac continued working at the Foster Ranch, but he spent every free moment at Zara's homestead. They worked side by side, expanding her wheat field, building a small barn, and planning for the future. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch he had added to her cabin, reading aloud from her books or simply talking as the sun set over the hills. Their first kiss came on a warm August evening as they returned from checking fence lines at the edge of her property. A sudden summer storm had caught them, and they had taken shelter beneath a rocky overhang, laughing as they wiped rain from their faces. "You have never looked more beautiful," Isaac said, his voice husky as he brushed a wet strand of hair from her cheek. Zara's breath caught at the intensity in his blue eyes. "Even soaking wet and covered in mud, especially then," he murmured, and then his lips were on hers, gentle yet insistent. Zara had been kissed before, perfunctory pecks from suitors her parents had approved, but nothing had prepared her for the warmth that spread through her at Isaac's touch. She responded instinctively, her arms winding around his neck as she pressed closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the day I met you," he confessed. "What took you so long?" Zara teased, her heart lighter than it had ever been. As summer waned and autumn approached, their relationship deepened. Isaac began spending more nights at Zara's cabin than at the Foster bunkhouse, though he always maintained propriety by sleeping in the newly constructed barn. The townspeople of Douglas watched their courtship with approval. Isaac was well respected, and Zara had proven herself a capable homesteader against all expectations. It was Mrs. Jenkins who first mentioned marriage, cornering Zara in the general store one September afternoon. "That young man of yours planning to make an honest woman of you before winter sets in," Zara blushed despite herself. "We haven't discussed marriage." Mrs. Jenkins raised an eyebrow. "Well, you'd best get to discussing it. Winter's harsh out here, and two people fare better than one when the blizzards come." The conversation stayed with Zara as she drove home. She and Isaac had spoken of the future in general terms, but neither had broached the subject of marriage directly. Did she want to marry him? The question should have been more difficult than it was. In just a few months, Isaac had become essential to her happiness in a way she had never anticipated. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the hills gold and crimson, Zara gathered her courage. "Isaac, have you thought about what happens when winter comes?" He glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about it a great deal, actually." And, instead of answering directly, Isaac reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment." He opened his hand to reveal a simple gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. "It was my mother's," he explained, his voice soft. "My father gave it to her when they had nothing but dreams." Zara's heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. "Isaac," he slid from the porch bench to kneel before her, taking her hand in his. "Zara Zimmerman, I love you, not despite your independence and determination, but because of them. You are the strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever known, and I want nothing more than to build a life alongside you, equal partners in all things." Tears blurred Zara's vision. "Even though I insisted the land remain in my name. Even though I'm stubborn and opinionated and will likely argue with you at every turn." Isaac laughed, his eyes shining with emotion. "Especially because of those things. I don't want a wife who echoes my thoughts. I want one who challenges me, who makes me better than I am alone." "Yes," Zara said, the word bursting from her heart before she could overthink it. "Yes, I will marry you, Isaac Northrop." He slid the ring onto her finger, then rose to pull her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the love and promise of their future together. They were married in Douglas 2 weeks later, a simple ceremony witnessed by the Jenkinses and several of Isaac's fellow ranch hands. Zara wore a new blue dress she had sewn herself, with a sprig of late wildflowers in her hair. Isaac had purchased a new shirt and waistcoat for the occasion, and his smile when he saw her walking toward him was brighter than the autumn sun. Their wedding night was a revelation to Zara. Isaac's tenderness, as they explored this new dimension of their relationship, left her breathless with wonder. Their bodies seemed made for each other, finding a natural rhythm that echoed the harmony they had discovered in every other aspect of their lives together. "I never knew it could be like this," Zara whispered in the darkness as they lay entwined beneath the quilts in their cabin. Isaac's lips brushed her temple. "Like what? So equal, so mutual." She traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips. "My mother told me a wife's duty was to submit, to endure." Isaac's arms tightened around her. "Your mother was wrong. This us should bring joy to both, or it isn't worth having." As winter approached, they worked together to prepare the homestead. Isaac officially left his position at the Foster Ranch, though he maintained a good relationship with his former employer, arranging grazing rights that benefited both properties. They added a second room to the cabin, expanded the barn, and laid in stores for the cold months ahead. Their first winter as husband and wife was both a challenge and a blessing. Heavy snows isolated them for weeks at a time, but they found contentment in each other's company. Isaac taught Zara to play chess, and she introduced him to the pleasure of reading novels aloud by the fire. They talked endlessly, sharing memories and dreams, forging a partnership that went beyond physical attraction to a deep meeting of minds. When spring finally arrived, it brought with it the news that Zara was expecting their first child. "A harvest baby," Isaac said with wonder, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "He'll be born just as the wheat ripens." Zara teased. "So certain it's a son, daughter would be even better," Isaac replied with a grin. "Another strong Zimmerman woman to keep me on my toes." The pregnancy didn't slow Zara down as much as Isaac might have wished. She insisted on continuing her share of the work, though she allowed him to take over the heaviest tasks. Their land flourished under their combined efforts. The wheat field expanded, a small orchard was planted, and they added cattle to their growing list of livestock. Late one August night, as a summer storm raged outside reminiscent of the one that had first brought them together, Zara went into labor. Isaac proved a steady presence, following her instructions to fetch the midwife they had arranged to stay with them in the final weeks. Throughout the long hours that followed, He never left her side, supporting her through each wave of pain with quiet encouragement. Just as dawn broke, their son was born, a healthy, robust boy with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would eventually settle into the same blue as his father's. They named him William after Isaac's father, with Thomas as a middle name to honor Zara's grandfather. "He's perfect," Isaac whispered, cradling his son with hands that suddenly seemed too large and rough for such a tiny being. Zara watched them, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "He is," she agreed, "and so is his father." Isaac looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for our son, for loving me, for everything. When I found you by that broken wagon, I never imagined you would build me a new life as surely as I helped rebuild your wheel." "We built it together," Zara corrected gently, "and we'll keep building day by day." The years that followed fulfilled that promise. Their homestead flourished, becoming one of the most productive in the region. William was joined by a sister, Emily, 3 years later, and another brother, James, 2 years after that. The cabin expanded into a proper house with a stone foundation and glass windows, though they kept the original structure as its heart. Isaac's skills as a blacksmith and wheelwright became known throughout the territory, providing additional income as settlers continued to arrive. Zara's garden experiments led to a small but successful seed business, with customers as far away as Cheyenne eager for varieties proven to thrive in Wyoming's challenging climate. Douglas grew from a dusty outpost to a proper town, and the Northrop homestead became a gathering place for community celebrations. Isaac and Zara were respected as pioneering settlers who had helped establish the region, their partnership a model for the blending of traditional and new ideas about marriage and family. On the 10th anniversary of the day, Isaac had found Zara stranded with her broken wagon. They stood together on the hill overlooking their property. The original 40 acres had expanded to over 200, with fields of wheat and corn, pastures dotted with cattle and horses, and an orchard heavy with ripening fruit. Their children played in the yard below, their laughter carrying on the summer breeze. "Did you ever imagine this?" Isaac asked, his arm around Zara's waist. "That day in the storm, did you ever think your life would unfold this way?" Zara leaned her head against his shoulder, considering the question. "No," she admitted. "I came west seeking independence, determined to rely on no one but myself." "Do you regret it, letting me into your life?" She turned to face him, taking in the familiar features now lined with a decade of Wyoming sun and wind. "Not for a single moment. You didn't take my independence, Isaac. You enhanced it. We built something together that neither of us could have created alone." Isaac's smile was as warm as it had been on that first day. "A wagon wheel may have broken, but it led to everything whole and good in my life." "In our life," Zara corrected, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "Our life, our land, our family." As the sun began to set, painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber, they walked hand in hand back to the house they had built together, to the family they had created, to the life they had forged from determination, respect, and love. The broken wagon wheel that had once seemed like disaster had been just the beginning of a journey neither could have imagined, one that had led them home. 5 years later, as they celebrated William's 15th birthday, a letter arrived from St. Louis. Zara's father, now widowed and in failing health, asked to visit the grandchildren he had never met. Though hesitant, Zara agreed, and when the elderly Mr. Zimmerman arrived by train that summer, he found not the failed experiment he had expected but a thriving enterprise. "You were right," he admitted to Zara as they sat on the wide porch of the home she and Isaac had built. "And I was wrong. You've created something remarkable here." "We created it," Zara corrected, watching as Isaac taught William the finer points of horseshoeing in the yard. "Together." Her father nodded, a hint of wistfulness in his eyes. "You found a rare man in Isaac." "I did," Zara agreed. "One who saw me as a partner, not a possession." Mr. Zimmerman stayed for a month, gradually winning the affection of his grandchildren and developing a respect for the son-in-law he had never met. When he departed, he left behind the family Bible and a substantial investment in their farm's future expansion. "Your mother would be proud," he told Zara at the station. "She never had your courage, but she would have admired it in you." That winter brought record snows and bitter cold, testing even the most established homesteads. The Northrops weathered it better than most, their preparations thorough and their home well constructed. They opened their doors to neighbors less fortunate, sharing stored food and fodder until spring finally arrived. As the years passed, William grew into a thoughtful young man who combined his father's mechanical aptitude with his mother's determination. At 20, he left for college in Denver, the first in the region to pursue higher education with plans to study engineering and bring new innovations back to the family farm. Emily, fiercely independent like her mother, showed a remarkable talent for animal husbandry, developing a line of drought-resistant cattle that would eventually become prized throughout the West. James, the youngest, revealed a gift for numbers and took over the business aspects of their growing enterprise, expanding into new markets with visionary zeal. Isaac and Zara watched their children grow with pride, their own partnership deepening with each passing year. The passion that had sparked between them never dimmed. If anything, it matured like fine wine, richer and more complex with time. They still worked side by side, though they delegated more as they entered their 50s, allowing themselves time to pursue shared interests like the library they established in Douglas. On their 30th wedding anniversary, with their children and grandchildren gathered around them, Isaac surprised Zara with a gift, a small, carved wooden wagon wheel, perfectly crafted and set in a frame of polished silver. "To remember how we began," he said, his voice still strong though his hair had silvered. "With a broken wheel and the courage of a remarkable woman." Zara, her own hair now streaked with gray but her amber eyes as bright as ever, accepted the gift with tears of joy. "And the kindness of a passing cowboy who helped build more than just a wheel." "I love you, Starlight," Isaac whispered, using the nickname that had become his alone to use. "More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." "And I love you," Zara replied, taking his weathered hand in hers. "My cowboy, my partner, my heart." As the celebration continued around them, they stood together on the porch of the home they had created, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in colors no artist could capture. The journey that had begun with a broken wagon wheel during a fierce storm had led to a life neither could have imagined, one built on respect, partnership, and an enduring love that had only strengthened through every challenge and triumph they had faced together. The wagon wheel had broken in the storm, and a cowboy had ridden past. But what he had helped build was far more than a replacement wheel or even a prosperous homestead. Together, Isaac and Zara had built a new life for themselves, for their children, and for all who would come after them. A life founded on equality, mutual respect, and a love that had transformed them both, wheel by wheel, day by day, heart by heart.